Joining me now are two congressional representatives on opposite sides of this issue. On the right of your screen, you see Roger Williams, a congressman and a Republican from a Texas district that includes Fort Hood. On the left of your screen, you see Congresswoman Karen Bass from California. Welcome to you both, and thanks for joining us on CNN today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Congressman Williams, let's start with you. You've called any efforts by the Obama administration to enact gun control, quote, an attack on law-abiding gun owners. Yet nationally, there's support for expanded background checks, and there's majority support for it in Texas as well. Why not follow the will of the people?
Well, I don't know that that be the case, the will of the people. Surveys we see don't necessarily show that. But more important than that, what President Obama is trying to do is not going to work. What you're penalizing the good guys, and the bad guys are going to do bad things anyway. I think what we see, quite frankly, is a extension of President Obama's anti-gun legislation, and he's using situations like Fort Hood, Chattanooga, California, to get that point across, and I think he's dividing Americans. The truth of the matter is that the anti-gun legislation is what he's promoting. And like I say, it's not going to work. And I wish that he would focus on what I think is important, and that is fighting terror in this country. I mean, we're literally under attack, and he does not want to admit that terror exists here. As you mentioned, I represent Fort Hood, and we had to argue a long time whether it was a terrorist attack or workplace violence. So I think I'd like to see the president focus more on terror than attacking the Second Amendment in the Constitution.
But Congressman Williams, you're pivoting and talking about a different issue, terrorism. When it comes to mass shootings in the United States, you at least agree that something needs to be done.
Well, I think there's no question. I think you have to look, too, at what needs to be done as we have to address mental illness in this country. I don't think we've done that good a job. We have to focus on that. We have to reach out to those people and let them know there is help available and so forth. But this is not driven by guns. This is not driven by good people. It's driven by bad people. In many cases, mental illness is an issue, and I think we have to address that. And
I think mental health is part of the U.S. president's overall strategy here. Congresswoman Bass, you support what the president is doing, but really for this to stick over time, you'll have to work with Congressman Williams and many others who will resist this. How can you both work together on this issue?
Well, I think the congressman gave a very specific point where I'm in complete agreement with him, and that is on the issue of mental health. And one of the things that the president called for in the executive orders, he called on Congress to approve $500 million for mental health. And so I do think, as in always, there's ways that Democrats and Republicans can come together, and I think that's a perfect example. I mean, we really need to think about it. There is no other country on the planet, a developed country, that has the type of mass shootings that we do. You know, what the president called for actually was not new legislation. He essentially called for modernizing our current system. So when background check legislation was put into being several years ago, it predated the internet. So he's calling for essentially us to strengthen existing laws, which actually I think that's something that the National Rifle Association has said that they support. We don't, according to them, we don't need new legislation, but we do need to enforce existing legislation, and that's exactly what the president called for. But funding mental health, Mr. Williams and I are in complete agreement about that.
Okay, a bit of progress there. Congressman Williams, President Obama blasted the NRA. He said this is not an effort to take away anyone's guns. It's to stop violence. So we know that you think mental health needs to be addressed, but don't you think that background checks should be improved so that we know who is purchasing weapons that can kill people?
Well, we have background checks now when people buy from gun dealers. But let me just say this. Do you think they are
effective?
Well, let me just say this. If what President Obama wanted to do was effective, why is it not working in Chicago? Chicago, where he is from, has the strictest gun laws anywhere in the United States. But yet every single day we read about the tragedies that come out of Chicago from people killing people. So like I say, it doesn't work. What he's proposing just doesn't work, and we need to have to address the issues we've already talked about with mental illness. I'm very grateful that in his plan he's got money set aside for that, as long as that's where it goes. But the fact of the matter is, the he is dividing America, and it gets back to his anti-gun agenda when he ought to be focused on terrorism in this country.
Well, the president would say he can do more than one thing at a time, and he did mention the shootings in Chicago as well. Congresswoman Bass, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think Mr. Williams is right. But, you know, one of the problems in Chicago, an area like Chicago, Chicago might have very tight gun laws, but the areas around, the states around Chicago do not have strict gun laws, which is one of the reasons why so many guns do come into Chicago. There's a lot of different problems we have in this country that lead to violence, and we need to have a comprehensive strategy. And I absolutely think that the points that the president laid out is one part of a strategy. So we do need to modernize the background checks. We need to deal with internet sales. We need to deal with the way law enforcement should have information about people who are mentally ill. So part of it is information sharing, but a lot of it is really updating an outdated system. So I think that, you know, when it comes to inner city urban violence, you need a completely separate strategy. But one thing I think is often missed is that people in those communities organize and fight every single day against the violence. And sometimes that doesn't actually get the proper media coverage that I think it deserves.
And just in the interest of transparency, Congressman Williams, how much money have you received from the NRA?
Frankly, I do not know, but I support the NRA. I support what they're doing. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I don't mind telling you that. And so it's not an NRA issue. The NRA is working to make things right, to make sure that people can live in this country with the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment is the most important amendment, I believe, certainly in my district and in Texas we feel that. So I'm an NRA member, and I'm proud of that.
Okay, and I can help you answer that question. In 2014, you received at least $2,000. That's through opensecrets.org. Our viewers can check that out. And in the interest of being balanced here, Congresswoman Bass, how much money have you received from the NRA?
Well, the NRA, actually, they have this report card that they give to legislators every year, and I do have to say that I've been graded an F, which means they wouldn't give me a dime.
Okay, well, I appreciate you both coming in to talk about this issue. Representative Roger Williams from Texas and Representative Karen Bass from California. I appreciate it.
Thank you.